Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So this, for those of you who are new, this is my weekly series where we talk about some aspect of making music using MuseScore. And usually we have a particular theme we talk about. Today is going to be all about MuseScore 4.1, the new features and so forth. So I'm going to be showing off as many as possible of the new things that there are to show off here. So we've got the chat going, and thanks for the comments coming in so far. And I have a link. Let me actually do something a little different here. I'm going to try to expose the chat on the side so I can interact with it if necessary. But you should have a link here to where the official announcement is, and it kind of lists what all the new features are and so forth. So we can, if you have a particular thing that you're especially interested in me getting to, be sure to let me know in the chat about it, and maybe put a little emoji in front of it, put a question mark or an exclamation point emoji if you have a particular thing there. So yes, those are, I want to try to get to as much of this as possible. And so I'm going to kind of move fast, but know that in my MuseScore course, my Mastering MuseScore 4 course, I will have lessons for all the new material. I've already posted the first 3 of them, covering some of the main things already. So Dennis, yeah, hopefully you're able to come back here. So I've already uploaded the first few lessons covering new features in MuseScore 4.1, and I'll be just adding more over the next week or two. So let's just first pop over to where that actual announcement is. And so this, if you go to musescore.org and then in forum, and first of all, you don't need to go here, right? If you're in MuseScore 4, then you should see an update announcement already. But this is how to get to the announcement that has the information. And there's a video here that they produced that kind of highlights the features really briefly. I'm going to be going into much more depth. So what I would say are kind of the big ticket items. I mean, it's a 4.1, right? It's not MuseScore 5. It's not a giant new release, but it's a significant one. So the ornament stuff is especially going to be interesting, I think, for people to see. The capo is a useful thing. The harp pedal is really cool. I would love to be able to show off the live Braille, and I will show off this a little bit, but without an actual Braille display connected, it really won't work. And Allison, your comment about throwing darts is, yeah, I can talk more about that tomorrow. Okay. When we talk a little bit more about the melody. But yeah. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through these, and I have my own kind of checklist of the things that I want to make sure that I cover. And it includes a few things not on the other list because they weren't, they're little minor things, but I think that will make a difference for people. So let's go ahead and dive in. I've created a new score that's going to allow me to show some of these things off. So the first thing I'm going to show is the harp pedal diagram thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put in some notes here. Oh, let's turn our volume back up. And now I'm going to put in an F sharp and then maybe an F natural. Actually, let's make it explicit F natural and then an E flat. Okay, so this is actually the little melody that I use in the course to show the thing. So if you know anything about writing for harp, you know that it can only play at least the pedal harp can only play the notes that it's designed to play based on the pedal. So if you have the pedal allowing you to play F natural, you won't be able to play F sharp until you change the pedal position. So what we have now is a diagram that you can add to your score that will show the pedal position. So I'm going to go to the palettes here and then click where it says add palettes, and then we're going to add the harp palette because it won't be there by default. Now that we have our harp palette, let's open it up. you'll see two different harp diagram things here. One that kind of has a pictograph showing the pedal, and there's another one that shows text. They work very similarly. I'll show you the pictogram version first. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And so someone maybe suggests that Joanne come back because obviously it's not working. You know, it's always the case that sometimes you just need to refresh your screen or leave and come back. So someone maybe put that in the chat there. So as soon as I clicked the harp diagram in the palette, you'll see that I got the palette here. I got that diagram showing up here in the score. And by default, it's showing me all naturals. So what I want to do is tell it I want F sharp. So the F column here, I want to click the sharp. And now you'll see the pedal diagram is showing me that actual diagram. It's showing this is how the pedals are actually arranged on a harp. So now it's telling me, so now I've set it up so that I have, I'm telling it that it can play F sharps now. And so that's great. And this is all good. I've got my diagram in there and it let me play these notes. But notice now the F natural and the E flat in the next measure are colored red. That's because they're not playable until we change the pedal again. So MuseScore is able to detect that and let you know, so that now we can come over here and add another diagram and say, no, I want the F natural and I want the E flat. And now it puts that diagram in, showing me the appropriate pictures, and the notes are no longer colored red, so that we know that this is playable. So that's how the diagram versions work. You can also just switch it over from the pictogram to just text. And now it'll show you the same information, that E flat and F natural are what you need as text. And here it is also smart enough to know that those were the only two pedals that actually changed. All the rest of the pedals stay the same. When you use the text diagrams, that's the normal way you do it, is by just indicating the changes. So that's how the pedal diagram feature works. That's basically all there is to it. So, but it's really nice for doing harp music because especially the highlighting of the unplayable notes, it does the math for you to figure that out. So it's really kind of cool. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is capo. So I'm going to put in a melody for capo for guitar here, and I'll put it here. All right, so I've got my guitar melody in here. Let's go ahead and just stick it on a new system. And I'll put some chord symbols on it too. We'll make this be a C chord, Control right, G, Control right, C. By the way, let me just cover another one, check another one off my list right now. Control left, Control right. Those of you who have been using MuseScore 4 or have been hearing me talk about it know that that is now how you move from measure to measure within while you're entering chord symbols. It used to be tab, but MuseScore 4 is trying to reserve tab for its normal accessibility function of moving around the user interface, not for navigating in your score. So Control left and Control right are going to be already how you move through, measure by measure in MuseScore 4. Now, MuseScore 3 had another command that would let you move by a specific duration, and it was Control and a number. Like if you wanted to move a half note at a time, you could type Control 6. That stopped working in MuseScore 4 due to a series of bugs that were kind of interrelated. And also Control right didn't work on all keyboards, which is also pretty normal, that some keyboards might not work with everything. Well, they did a lot of work trying to improve that. I helped out a little bit in that process. So now if I type Control 6, see, Control 6. All right, well, apparently I think I customized that shortcut because that's true. I did customize that shortcut because it wasn't working before. So I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, and under Shortcuts, I'll type chord symbol. And where I had customized this one here, Advanced Cursor by half note, you see I had customized it to be Control Alt right. I'm going to reset it to the default. And while I'm at it, I'll reset the eighth note advance also. And there might be some others that I customize, but I'm not going to worry about that. So let's see what happens now if I type Control 6. There we go. It moved by a half note. So Control 6 will move by half notes. Control 5 moves by quarter notes. And Control 4 moves by eighth notes. So if I'm in here and I press Control 4, you see I get a cursor right there on the little, the eighth note gap in between there. So this is something that was in MuseScore 3 that was lost in MuseScore 4 and is now added back. All right, so now let's get back to talking about capo. So if you know about guitar, you might want to, if you want to play a passage in D flat, if you're a skilled guitarist, you just play it in D flat. But a lot of people playing guitar, especially beginning guitar players, and not even just beginning guitar players, really playing in D flat is a lot more complicated, especially playing chords, because they all have to be bar chords compared to playing in C. So it's very common in pop music, especially, to play in an easy key like C or G or A, and then use a capo to change how it sounds. So let me play this. It'll sound like the key of C. Now what I'm going to do is go to the guitar palette, and I'll again add palettes if you don't have it added already. We're going to add the guitar palette. And now that my guitar palette is here, we'll see now that there is a capo. And when I click that, it gives me the text there in the score that says capo 1, and it lets me customize some various different things about it. Like if you want, like usually the capo applies to all the strings on the guitar. It raises them all by one half step at a time. But there is such a thing as a partial capo, and so you can customize that if you want. You can also put in some different text that says, add capo now, fret 1 or whatever. And you'll see that when I come here, it now says add capo now, fret 1. And when I play this, it's playing in D flat now. There you go. So so that's pretty much the capo feature. It will allow you to write in the easy to play key and then use the capo to get the playback. There was a version of that in MuseScore 3 that was a little bit awkward, didn't work nearly as well, didn't allow for the partial capos and things like that, was a little more awkward to get to. So the main thing about this compared to MuseScore 3 is it's simpler to use, as well as kind of more powerful in that sense. And it would also apply to tablature for that matter. So those are two of the big things right there. So now I want to show you something else. I want to show you the ornament stuff, which is new. So let's go and enter a D in the clarinet part. And I'm going to add from the ornaments palette. Do I have an ornaments palette yet? No, I got to add my ornaments palette. So, because this is my regular workspace, I've already added all the palettes I need, but this is my demo one, so I can show you how to add palettes. So click to add the ornaments palette. And now that I have my ornaments palette, let's open that up and we will add a trill. If I play this right now, this is for clarinet, so it's transposed, it's in the key of D. Let's hear this play back here. It's playing back a trill from D to E, because that's how trills normally work. They go with the next note in the key. If I had made this an E, now it's going to trill E to F sharp. It's using whatever is in the key. Well, what if you didn't want that? What if you wanted to trill to an F natural? There used to be a really complicated series of workarounds to get the natural sign to show up on the trill symbol and to get the playback. But it was very, very complicated, awkward, and didn't always work. So now there's a very powerful and simple facility here. You select that trill, you come over to the properties panel, and you'll see where it says interval, auto, or diatonic is the default. But if I want it to be a minor second to go to F, I select minor, and second was already, because it's normally a second. So now when I hit play, it's going to play a trill to an F natural instead of to an F sharp. And the natural sign showed up right there on the trill. right? So there's more to it than that. Also, for trills, if you want to have a trill that's in fact a larger interval than just a step, MuseScore will support you in that. Also, you can say I want this interval to be say major third. And now you'll see it's going to G sharp. And if I play this now, it's trilling between E and G sharp. And instead of just putting a sharp sign on the trill, which would have indicated F sharp, it's actually putting in a little note, a small note, and putting it in parentheses. So it's doing these things automatically to show the trill, and it's playing it back correctly without a whole complicated series of workarounds. So that works for trills. It also works for turns and mordants and things like that as well. You can also, let me go back to just the step for a second. If I go back to the major second here, no, let's go to a minor second. I can also then, if I want, reposition this natural sign. Not that you should need to, because the default position was chosen by a professional engraver to be the way that actual publishers normally position them. But you will see you can position that separately. You can also put parentheses around it by checking that little box there, except that doesn't seem to actually work. Maybe it does only if it's in the default position. All right, I don't know. It was working before. So that might only apply to regular accidentals, not these fancy trill accidentals, perhaps. So that's the ornament stuff. So those are some of the big ticket items. I mentioned the Braille display, and I can't fully demonstrate that without an actual Braille display. And from what I know, it works well on Windows, but Mac maybe not. I don't know if apparently some Braille displays might work on Mac, but this is still an open question is what's going on with Braille displays on Mac. But on Windows, it should work in general. And if I go to Edit, Preferences, you'll see now there is a Braille option here, and I'm going to enable the Braille panel. When I enable the Braille panel, I now have visible on my screen an actual representation of the Braille patterns for whatever is selected. If I select this measure here, it's going to be showing me what's, let me expand that panel so we can see more at a time. It's showing me the dot pattern, and it's showing me for all the staves there, and I can cursor through them, and it will kind of read off, it's going to show me information in the status bar about what's going on here. So these dots would help if you're trying to learn Braille, by selecting something and then looking at the Braille panel. It'll help you understand the association between the standard notation and the Braille. But more importantly, if you're a blind user and you have a Braille display attached to your computer, and it's one that's compatible with this whole system, it will actually display the Braille for that full measure, and you will just be able to read the Braille, with your fingertips normally. So it is known, again, that it doesn't work on Mac, or at least it doesn't work with all devices. It might work with some. We're not totally sure, but they are actively working on it. It's on the short list. Elizabeth, it's definitely known to work on Windows for sure. The Mac story is less sure because someone supposedly had tested it and it was working at some point, but we don't know if it's just because they were using a different Braille display or if they had a special driver. We don't know what the story is. So if we go and look at the official release announcement, it's listed under known compatibilities, may not work correctly with certain Braille displays on Mac OS, and there is an issue filed for this already on GitHub, and some discussion while people trying to sort out what's actually going on with that. So hopefully they'll have that cleared up at some point, and there will be, by 4.2 or maybe sooner, they'll have that working on Mac as well. So these are some of the biggest ticket items that I wanted to show you, but there's lots of other smaller things that I want to show. So, so Shiana, you're asking about fixing your things. Yeah, if you had previously used like one of those workarounds, those workarounds won't go away, right? If you had added a symbol manually, if you had added a note in another voice to trick the playback, if you've done all these sort of manual workarounds, yeah, you're going to want to remove those manual workarounds and now add the existing one. Now, you don't have to go over any of them, but any ones that you want to be able to take advantage of the new feature, yeah, you'll have to update. I mean, you'll have to go into your score and make the appropriate change. But the good news is, at least it's pretty simple. So Elizabeth, let me read your comment here in the real chat here, because my pop-up version cuts it off a little. Yeah, so unfortunately, you are so Elizabeth, are you using the actual 4.1 or the release candidate? Because the release candidate is by now several days old, and on mine, it doesn't just say Braille pattern dots; it actually reads something else. But that could also be Windows versus Mac, how the screen reader works. So I don't really know. But yeah, it will. There's still some tweaking to do, still some understanding to do before we can figure this out. And I mentioned make August, or a good chunk of August, to do a project where we kind of collectively work to learn a little more about Braille, because I want to learn more too, and how to use these tools. So we'll sort all this out together. So I don't know that that's going to change, because I don't think there were any Braille changes between the release candidate and now, but there definitely were between the beta and now. So it could just be a Mac versus Linux thing, because I'm on Linux actually. All right, so let's look back at my list and see what else. I want to talk about key signatures and transposition. So this has been a thing for kind of a long time that MuseScore has struggled with, and again, there's been awkward workarounds. But let's say that you were writing some music in the key of, let me think of what key I want to put this in. I want to put this in the key of B. I want to put music in concert B for clarinet. So I'm checking the concert pitch box, and now I'm going to write some music in concert B. And if I actually put a B key signature on this, let's go ahead and do that. Let's open the key signatures palette and put a B key signature on it. So this is all well and good when we're in concert pitch. But when we transposed it, what used to happen is MuseScore would say, oh, B transposed for clarinet, 7 sharps. I can do that. It'll gladly give you a 7 sharps key signature. And some clarinetists will prefer that because they're so used to seeing sharps. Clarinet players, alto sax players, etc., people who play transposing instruments get very accustomed to seeing more sharps because everything gets transposed adds sharps. So often they might tell you, I prefer 7 sharps. However, MuseScore now gives you the option of not doing it that way. So let me just give myself a little wiggle room here. I'm going to turn off the concert pitch button. Notice MuseScore, in transposing it, did not put it in C sharp. It put it in D flat. This is now the new default. It will simplify the key signature for you. So if the transposition would have resulted in 7 sharps, it will turn it into 5 flats, etc. So that's a simplification, and it not only did that, MuseScore 3 even could do that, but you had to go out of your way to tell it prefer flats, and it wouldn't respell the notes for you. The notes would still have the old spelling, so you would have to fix that manually and all sorts of, again, complicated workarounds. So in MuseScore 4.1 now, it will default to simplifying the key. If you don't want it to simplify the key, that's fine. You can right-click the staff, go to staff part properties, and where it says prefer sharps or flats, instead of the new auto setting, you can set it to the old none. setting, which means no preference, just do what math tells you. And B transposed up a whole step is C sharp, not D flat. So if I put none, it will show me C sharp. So that's another useful new feature. Hey, look, the parentheses showed up on the accidental at some point there. I guess it just was a temporary glitch where the parentheses don't show up until you do something else. There's lots of those little glitches ever since the very first release of MuseScore. All right. I'm just running through stuff. And again, if you see anything on, go ahead and check out that release announcement. If there's anything in particular that is jumping out at you as something you want to see, let me know. I want to knock off one more here from the first part of the list about line properties. So this is another area where there were certain features missing in MuseScore 3, that were missing when they first released MuseScore 4. Some of the missing things were because they needed to be redesigned and improved. Some of them were just oversights, and some of this stuff was just an oversight. So let me show you some stuff now that used to not be possible, but now is. If I add in MuseScore 4, so if I select this measure here and come over to the palettes and add myself a piano pedal marking here, using, say, this version here with the angle brackets here. I'll put the start and angle there. If you go to the properties here, there used to not be ways of customizing the hook size and direction as fully as you can now. Steinar's asking, at what point does the simplification happen? At 7. In other words, once the transpose key is 7, it will change it to 5. Basically, that's how it goes. So 6 and 6 is not, right? So, and this isn't the concert key, because remember, different instruments have different transposition. Horn transposes only adds 1 sharp. B flat instruments add 2. E flat instruments add 3. So, the simplification will happen when it gets to 7 sharps, regardless of how many sharps that might have been in concert pitch. If you want it to definitely prefer flats, you can tell it prefer flats. So in that same dialogue was a way to say prefer flats, and then it will prefer flats even if there's only 5 of them, right? Or even if it would have meant 7 flats, right? It'll prefer flats will literally prefer flats, but auto does whatever is simplest. It'll give you the least number of accidentals in your key signature. So by all means, download this and try it out and play with it, and you can figure out all the different corner case scenarios that way as well. I want to try to read the rest of Alan. And so, yeah, and so there's another thing. Yeah, it's definitely true, Allison, that if you're reading an E-flat instrument, some people use the trick of reading it as bass clef and then adding things manually if you're having to read concert pitch. But normally you don't read concert pitch. Normally the part is transposed for you with the proper clef, and so MuseScore is trying to do that in a way that simplifies the reading. So anyhow, all of these settings here, the start hook, the end hook, as well as the text. So for instance, for the this line, let me delete that line actually and add the other kind of line. I'm going to add the pedal line that has the ped. That, this looks like an L, but it's really a P. It's just a traditional old script. If I select that and go to properties, I can also change the text on that so that instead of keyboard pedal ped, I can put keyboard pedal sost. And now I get the fancy script sostenuto thing, right? So there's all of these things. You can customize the text that appears on that pedal line. You can customize the hook style and all these things, the size of the hook, make this hook point up and down. All these settings that were, some of which were not present in 4.0 are now present again in 4.1. And I think a couple new ones too, that had already showed up in 4.0. So anyhow, the lines, if like I know for harp, Marla had mentioned needing a particular way of making the hooks go in the opposite direction of the norm and customizing their direction. Negative numbers weren't supported. Now they are. So, there's all sorts of things like that that are customizable. Let me check out Bob's thing. Oh, lyric pasting. Cutting and pasting a single note. So I'm not sure what you mean, but let's do this. I'm going to copy your text here. Does lyric pasting include affix for moving the? I think I missed the last letter of the, but you're going to get the idea here. What I'm going to do is go in here and I'm going to type Control L for lyrics, and I'm going to type Control V. You ready? Does lyric pasting include affix? So this is, again, something that worked in MuseScore 3 and stopped working in MuseScore 4, but now works again in 4.1. If you select a whole chunk of text, then when you paste it into lyrics, it will paste it one note at a time. And of course, it put the word lyric as a single word there because it didn't know better. But if I come back to the chat and say, does lyric pasting include, and copy that, let me undo all those things, and let's try this again. Control L, paste, lyric pasting include, right? So it works to go one syllable at a time, assuming you set up your hyphens in the text, before you do the copy and paste. So that's how, so again, this is something that was in MuseScore 3, stopped working in MuseScore 4, and now is back in 4.1. What you're going to see is at 4.1 and then again at 4.2, there's going to be a list of these things that either inadvertently or because they needed to be redesigned, got omitted from 4.0 and they're gradually being added back. So let me show you a new one now that's it's going to be especially useful with Muse sounds. So let me listen to this clarinet here. So that sounds nice to me, but it's reverby, right? If you are hearing this, it's kind of a lot of reverb that we're hearing. And so in MuseScore 4.0, you couldn't customize that in Muse Sounds. The amount of reverb was it wasn't built into the samples. The samples were recorded dry, but a fixed amount was being added. Well, now let me actually close that Braille panel now because it's taking up too much space. Preferences. Braille. Yeah, it's a little annoying to me that you have to turn on and off the Braille panel through the preferences menu. Seems like it should just be a toggle like it is for the mixer and everything else, but whatever, I'm sure they'll refine it over time. So you'll now see that each instrument has its own built-in reverb control. And yes, there's some amount put in by default, but I can now turn the reverb off for the clarinet. And now when I listen to the clarinet part, it will be dry. No reverb. Right? No reverb. So if you want literally no reverb, you can have it. If you want a ton of reverb, you can have it. So let's hear a ton of reverb. Ton of reverb, right? So you can have as much or as little reverb per instrument now. And so it used to be in MuseScore 3, there was a reverb control, but it was global. There was no way to add different amounts of reverb to different instruments. So this is something now where MuseScore 4.1 goes above and beyond what MuseScore 3 could do. You can now control the amount of reverb per instrument. So if you want some instruments dry, others to have a bigger reverb effect or whatever, that is all possible now. And this is also connected to the performance improvements. So what happened in MuseScore 4.0 was there was reverb being added to every instrument, and there was like a separate processor if you could imagine like physical reverb units. Hey, Marla, by the way, when you go back and see, I already demoed the harp diagram thing. So go ahead, you might want to rewind and watch this in the replay, and you'll see where I go over the harp thing. But it's pretty cool. There's some stuff there, right? And if I remove this, here's the harp diagram thing there, delete it, and it shows the notes in red because they're not playable, all sorts of cool stuff like that. All right, so anyhow, if you can imagine like a physical mixer or a physical thing, like effect unit and all, if we had a separate reverb unit for every instrument, that's kind of what MuseScore 4 did. It was a separate reverb processor for every instrument. And this was a big part of why Muse Sounds struggled with big scores, because each instrument had its own separate reverb processor, meaning it was taking up its own, CPU time, etc. So now what happens is, even though there's reverb on every channel, it works more the way a traditional mixer does, where there's a single reverb unit, but we're controlling how much reverb is sent to that reverb for every channel. So that's why these are labeled aux sends, meaning this controls how much of the clarinet is sent to the reverb processor. And then you can also affect the global reverb amount by coming over here to the ... menu, and where it says view, I can look at aux channel 1. And this is now what's in aux channel 1, which is what has been sent. And here I can control globally how much reverb is added, as well as per channel. And all of this is based on how physical mixers work. Every single physical mixer I know has something fairly similar, where there's a control on each channel to control how much reverb from that channel goes to the aux, and then there's an overall aux volume, a send and a return volume also. So this is all based on that, and so it's designed to give you quite a bit more control. But since there's only one reverb processor instead of a whole ton of them, it's also a lot better for performance. So scores that MuseScore might have struggled with previously to play on your computer will now play much better. So let's come back to my list here. So dynamics. I want to show you this thing about dynamics and expression, because it's kind of cool. It's, again, in some ways a fairly minor thing, but it's a useful one. If I put in a dynamic marking here, okay, let me actually get that back and turn that reverb back down. About here. So let's add a dynamic marking. We want it to be P. What if I change my mind? Say, you know what? I didn't mean P. I wanted MF. Click it. Now it's an MF. Click it. Now it's double forte. So this is a simple, it's such a simple little hack. We could have done this at any time had anyone gotten around to it. It's just no one ever did. So finally someone did. So that if you, want to change a dynamic, just click it and click the palette. And notice this other thing that happened. Check this out. I put the F under that G, and it's centered under it. When I put the FFF, notice now it is no longer centered. It pushed it to the right automatically so that it won't crash into the bar line. That's something that MuseScore has always done before, was, if you added a long dynamic, it would still be centered and it would crash into the bar line, and you would have to adjust that manually. So no longer do you have to adjust that manually. In fact, I could change it to this guy here with 5 Fs, and it will still adjust it manually. It'll adjust it automatically to not collide with the bar line. So let me go back to putting in MF. And what if I want to put text on this also? So we used to have a thing where you would edit the dynamic and then put in the word sempre or whatever. And it would kind of sort of do the right thing, but we have a new way now. You can still do that. But check this out. I'm going to add expression text. Expression text has always been a thing in MuseScore, but it's always been sort of a strange stepchild of staff text. It is now its own thing that has its own specific behaviors. So if I type Control E to get expression text and type in sempre, Notice what it did. It didn't put the word sempre below the dynamic or above it. It knew to put it to the right. And not only does it know to put it to the right, but if I move the dynamic, the expression text moves with it. They are connected in that sense. And of course, you can override that. If I select this sempre and come over to properties, we'll see there's some a setting here to control whether it snaps to the dynamic or not, or whether it goes back to its old default position of directly underneath the note. But when you put the snap to dynamic on there, it will automatically move it to the right of the dynamic and align to it. So there's this right there. Those adjustments were some of the most common adjustments that you would have to do to create a readable score. You know, so many things starting with MuseScore 2, continuing in MuseScore 3, continuing further in MuseScore 4. The goal has been to do more stuff right automatically, so you don't have to manually adjust things. But this set of adjustments, having to adjust dynamics position and text position around the dynamics, those were some of the most common adjustments to need to make in MuseScore all along. And now that so many other things have been improved, these were some of the most, the ones that you would have to deal with the most often in MuseScore 4, not because it was worse than previous releases, but because so many other things have been fixed. Now this is fixed too. So that's one less thing to have to adjust manually. All right, the next thing I want to show you is something that's kind of cool. It's a little weird, but it's cool. What if I look at this here, and I have these measures here, and that one note of the next measure, and I really want to get this measure to fit onto the previous system. Now, this used to always be possible, and still probably is, if I select all those measures and press the left curly brace to reduce stretch, it's called. It does work. However, if I put more notes on there and I say, hey, I want to get all of these measures, say up to there, all squeezed onto one staff, I think I could reduce stretch all I wanted, and it's never going to be able to squeeze them all because it's just physically impossible. So there's limits to how much reduced stretch would allow you to squeeze things together. Well, I'm going to reset that, and now I want to do something different. I've got all those measures selected. I'm now going to come over to palettes, and I'm going to go to the layout palette, and I'm going to say this guy, keep measures on the same system. Ready for some magic? Boom. It forced them all onto the same system. In doing that, it broke some rules. It actually put some notes closer to the bar line than technically, your settings, because there's style settings to control all that. It put notes closer to the bar line than it should have. It put the key signature close to the bar line. And in fact, if I put in some eighth notes here, it will even, I mean, look at the crazy things it's doing. It's letting those notes actually touch. It's letting this key signature crash into that bar line. It's doing all sorts of crazy things that are not generally good ideas. But you asked for it, you can have it now. So you can now get as many measures onto a system as you want. Common sense be damned, right? So I'm not saying it's good to abuse it like this, but I am saying, yeah, if there's some cases where you really wanted to just squeeze one more measure on and you're willing to put up with a little bit of funniness to get it, now you can get it without having to actually change your global style settings to get it or make the score smaller. So that keep on the same system has been there for a little while, but it never used to do this. It never used to force measures onto the same system. It was more like what we call a non-breaking space in a word processor. It used to only keep measures on the same system if they would fit. So like if you had two measures and you said keep them on the same system, it would say, well, can I fit them on one at the end of one system? If I can't fit them both, I'm going to move them both. But it wouldn't allow you to put a whole bunch of measures. It was just to prevent a line break from occurring between two measures, if that makes sense. So anyhow, this feature, the keep keep measures together has been around for a while, but it never was as powerful as it is now. So I still got time. I'm still going to keep hacking at my list here. So I've actually hit so many of these things. This is cool. Two other things that I want to show, and they both involve rests. So here is one. Here, if I put in an eighth note, and then a rest, and then two more eighth notes, this is the normal default beaming in MuseScore, always has been. If I had done this, and if I want the beam to continue across that eighth note, there has always been a way of doing it where you had to go to the palettes and you know, mess with things. It's now in the properties panel. You can also do it in palettes if you want, but it's easier in properties. You can select that rest and tell it to join beams. And now the beam is joined across that rest, right? So this has been a feature in MuseScore 3 as well as 4.0, but the devil is in the details. What MuseScore 3 would do would be to lengthen those stems. So let me select this whole passage and move it up a bit. MuseScore 3 would have lengthened these stems so that this rest, so that it would avoid, so that the beam would avoid that rest. That was never correct. That was just the easy thing to do. MuseScore 4 would do nothing. It would just allow the collision, which wasn't nice, but at least it allowed you to correct it manually. MuseScore 4.1 now will move the rest automatically, which is what it should have been doing all along and just never has before. So if you want to beam over a rest, you can do that now very easily from the properties panel. So select the rest, click the beam icon, and it will automatically beam over the rest and adjust the rest's position to avoid the beam. So that's all new stuff, all cool stuff. The next thing to talk about here is really more of a bug fix, but it's a good one to know about. Let me add a guitar tablature staff. I'll select this guitar instrument, go to the instruments panel, open it up, and let me click the gear icon next to the treble staff and say create a linked staff, and select its gear icon and change it to tablature. Oh, let's change it to the kind that actually shows rests full. All right. If I wanted to enter a rest here, if I say I want to enter a G, I might come down to the G string, type a 0. Then to get a rest, if I wanted an eighth rest, I should be able to type the eighth note shortcut and then press semicolon to get a rest. Well, that stopped working at 4.0. It now works again in 4.1. So big deal, we fixed a bug. But here's the other thing that never worked before. In regular staves, you're supposed to be able to right-click to enter a rest. That never worked in tab. Now it finally does. It just never worked in tab before, right-clicking to add rests. It works on standard staves, right? I can right-click all day long on standard stave. It never used to work. When I say never, I mean going back to when tablature first got introduced at MuseScore 2. Actually, right-click to enter rest was new with 3 or so, but also the rest icon on the toolbar. There was no way to mouse enter a rest prior to MuseScore 4.1, as strange as it seems. And Joanne, yes, this is definitely all about 4.1. 4.1 just released this morning, or at least this morning my time. I don't know what time it was for you, but I mean, I know you're more or less in the same time zone, but for people in Australia or in Europe or Asia, it might have been afternoon before it came out. I don't know. But it just came out like a few hours ago. So this is all about 4.1. So yeah, rests you can now enter by mouse on tablature staves, and it also works more correctly if you use the rhythm entry mode. If I want to enter rhythm, so the way the rhythm mode works is you just type a duration like 5, and it just enters a note. 5, 4, 4, 5. It's great for drums because if you think about like a snare drum, the pitch is always going to be the same. You shouldn't have to keep re-entering the pitch. So the The rhythm mode is great for entering percussion instruments where you know it's going to be essentially the same pitch over and over again, and only the rhythm changes. If I want to enter eighth, or 16th, 16th, eighth, I just type 3, 3, 4, and I've got 16th, 16th, eighth. Rests were always a little weird in rhythm mode, because if you typed a 0, it would like add a rest of the current duration, but it didn't let you pick the duration first. So now I can select 0 to say I want to enter a rest, and then 4 gives me the 8th rest, and then 0 again to turn off rest mode, and now I can enter some more notes. Right? So rests now work correctly in rhythm mode as well as on tab staves. So yeah, I think I've managed to cover everything on my little list here. Beam over rests, rests in tab and rhythm mode, chord symbol, figured bass navigation. Yeah, the same thing I talked about, that Control 6 to move works like 2 beats at a time, works for figured bass also. So Control G is figured bass. If I type a figure here, like say 6, 4, and then Control 6, it moves me 2 beats ahead, where I can type my next figure like 7, and it does the right thing in terms of drawing these continuation lines. And this is, I'm not a figured bass person myself. I'm vaguely familiar with how it works, but I do know that the fact that Control 6 wasn't working, and Control 6 to move by half note, Control 5 to move by quarter, Control 4 to move by eighth, those hadn't been working for chord symbols or figured bass, and it was perhaps more problematic for figured bass than it was for chord symbols, because you could always just move a beat at a time with semicolon, and that always worked. But for figured bass, you really needed to be able to set this duration directly. And so if you use figured bass, you should find now that figured bass is much more usable. So I want to look again at the official list to see if there was anything else that was on the official list. Oh, Save to Cloud and audio.com. I totally missed those. They were on my list, but they were in a separate little category. So quick little show of this. If I go to the home tab here, notice if I go to My Online Scores, that's a new thing. And then if I say sign in, it will sign me in. Come back here and look at this. This isn't just scores that I used Save Online within MuseScore like recently. This is basically my entire list of scores from MuseScore.com, or at least the last 100 or so. I don't know how you if it just keeps scrolling. I think it just keeps loading more as you keep scrolling. So some of these, 9 months ago, some of these scores are quite old. Yeah, I can keep scrolling and keep scrolling. It's basically showing me 2 years ago, right? I mean, it's showing me all my online scores and allowing me to access them directly from within MuseScore. So you don't have to, if you want, you can access your MuseScore.com scores directly. And then there's another new thing here. If I go to publish, you'll see now a new button here that says share on audio.com. And if I do this, it's going to tell me I need to log in here. Audio.com is a platform that's existed for a little while now, and I'm not going to log in here because I can't remember if I'm going to have to type my password or log in with Google or whatever. But the audio.com is an interesting platform. Actually, let me try continue with Google and see if it works, because I can't remember how I created my account here. I don't use it for much. But audio.com is a cool little thing. And so it's going to let me share to audio.com here. But let's actually hop over to audio.com so we can see. There's my sign in. Oh, yeah, here's my stuff. Audio.com is a place where you can upload audio files. And so it's been around for about a year or two, maybe a couple of years. And it's run by the Muse group, right? The same company that kind of runs MuseScore as well as Audacity. And they developed this specifically for use with Audacity, but now it's integrated with MuseScore also. So you can upload audio there. And it used to be you had to upload it manually using your browser, but now you can publish a score directly to audio.com directly from MuseScore. And once it's been posted, then you can just, press the play button and hear the thing. So audio.com is a place to share audio files, and you can use it for anything you want. You can use it for, not only for uploading from MuseScore, but that's the new thing. Audio.com also allows you to upload really whatever audio you want. So Christopher had a question on notating Baroque something. Let's is there a keyboard way to accomplish the click to change dynamics? Is that the same question as the Baroque there? So there's a good question. So Christopher, if I say click, in principle, click means press enter or space. So in principle, if I have entered a dynamic marking like this MF, and then I use the cursor keys, tab. I'm tabbing through. I don't have a screen reader on, so you can't hear this, but I'm on the palettes. I'm on the add button. Oh, wait a minute. I need to get back to the palettes and actually enable the palettes now. Go down to the Dynamics palette, open it up, and let's see. I have MF selected in my score right now. I'm in the palette. PP is selected. Let me press space. Yep, it worked. So the exact same way you would add from the palette is, it works the same way to replace. If you have a note selected when you use the palette, it will add to that note. If you have a dynamic selected, it will replace that note. Is there another question about Baroque something here is the question, or was that just a weird autocorrect? Oh, is there a way to notate Baroque trills that are meant to move down from the bass note rather than upward? Okay, so normally Baroque trills don't do that. Baroque trills are normally up. As far as I know, I've never heard otherwise. There is mordants and other things that are up, but that are down. Is there a way to put in a downward trill? To be honest, I don't know. So let's come over, let's add a trill. Actually, let's come over to the palettes. Let's open my ornaments palette and let's go to more and see if any of these symbols say they are upside down, like up prawl line, down prawl line. Hey, that sounds like something. Is this a downward trill? No, that just had to do with the first note, I think. Let me delete all this other stuff here so I can hear. Actually, let me just solo it. I just gotta. Yeah, it just was about the down. It was just about the first note. So I think maybe Baroque, maybe what you're talking about, maybe Allison, you know better. But I'm not aware of a convention in which a trill would be notated downward. But yeah, there's all these different mordant with upper prefix, tremblement, tremblement. Yeah, I don't know what all these different things are, to be honest. So let's just try selecting a regular trill and see if there was an option to set the direction. I don't remember there being one, though. So let's go ahead and add a trill. Select the trill and go to Properties, Interval. Yeah, I don't see a way to set the direction down because I really don't think that's a thing. But I could be wrong, and if you think it is and it needs to be supported, let's make sure we submit an issue to GitHub requesting it. But yeah, I've never heard of that being a thing. I would imagine, though, that if it were to be supported, we would just add a special ornament directly for that to the palette, and then you just add that element directly. So of all the different ornaments that are already there on the palette, it's possible one of them already does the right thing, because there's quite a few ornaments there, and maybe one of them is the thing you're talking about. So, yeah, I think I keep looking. I'm looking back over my my notes here to see what else there is, and yeah, pasting VST. If you've been using VST instruments, there's certain ones that weren't compatible with MuseScore 4 because of whatever small issue. Some of them would even crash the program. They've made that better so that that's less likely to happen. When it talks about these engraving fixes and improvements, yeah, there are things like what I mentioned about the rest moving out of the way. There's all sorts of improvements there. Some of them having to do with tremolo, some of them having to do with beams, some of them having to do with articulations. So there's all sorts of improvement to the small improvements to the placements of things that you just get for free. There's no special thing you need to do to enable it, just improvements you get for free. So let's come back to chat, see if I missed anything else. Steinar's trying to customize some palettes. Yeah, so when you're customizing a palette, so this is something you should all know. When you're customizing a palette, you got to be a little patient. So if I have customized a trill, and let's try that. Let's customize a trill. I'm going to set this sucker to be a minor second. And that's curious. I did that, and it's not... Oh, because it already was a minor second. If I make it be a major second, come on, major second. Now I get that accidental. If you want to add that to the palette, you kind of got to be patient. So Control Shift Drag, it's going to show, no, you can't get there until you hit the right spot. And actually, that's curious. I see what you're seeing. Do I have to enable editing? It already is enabled. To be honest, I don't know what's going on there. That's a new one for me. Is it just that palette? No. So it was working not too long ago because I had done some palette customization. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but let's go ahead and look for it. So I'll investigate that a little more, and we'll try to figure out what's up with the palette customization. Meanwhile, I've covered everything I wanted to cover. It's quite a lot. So let's close out here. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the comments. And hopefully you all find this to be a useful update. It's got a lot of nice new things and little improvements. And, you know, some of these engraving improvements that I talked about, also playback improvements under the hood, little subtle things that, you know, weren't things that I were going to show here, but things that'll just make your score look and sound better in addition to all these features. So tomorrow will be my music masterclass, so definitely be checking that out, same time. And this is where we'll be talking about the project that we started working on, my brother Mike's piece, the song that we're going to be working on creating some sheet music for. So we're going to talk about transcribing that melody. And I know some people have already posted your versions of it, and we'll go into that, talk about, you know, the best way of notating this melody and things like that. So we'll be digging into that tomorrow. And that's what we'll be doing. So we'll just continue doing this. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, which I suspect is a few because I posted this a couple places, welcome, and hope to see you back next time. We'll be back here, though, next Wednesday talking more about MuseScore. So see you then.